Hello guys, welcome back to another JSP lesson. Today we are gonna learn about the JSP Implicit Objects. Objects made by the web container in the _JSP service method at JSP runtime are JSP Implicit Objects. These are method local variables not found in the JSP file but we code using them. They are actually now in JSP Implicit Objects. These are used to create web container and tell about other JSP pages. The available implicit objects are out, request, config, session and application, etc. First let's learn they are out with the JSP writer type, request with the HTTP server request type, and response with the HTTP server response type, and config with servlet config type, and application with servlet context type, and session with HTTP session site type, and page context with page context, page with object, and exception with throwable type. Now let's learn about the first one. We'll learn about the JSP out implicit object right now. It is like the print writer and it's the easiest way to write the output. We'll copy this example and paste it here. We'll print our calendar.getTime with the out variable object. And we get the output today, Tuesday, February 1. Okay, next let's go to the next object, the request implicit object. The request is an implicit object of type HTTP server request, created for each request by the web container. It can be used to get request information such as parameter, header information, remote address, server name, server port, content type, character encoding, etc. Let's see an example for this. We copy this example and paste it here. What we are doing here is we are request dispatching the request with the request implicit object, the get request dispatcher with the web.inf welcome JSP page, and we are forwarding the request and response as well. So it will go to this page and provide the welcome back body. Let's run this and check it out. When we run this, we'll go to welcome page and we can see the welcome back message. Alright, next let's learn about the response implicit object. The response implicit object is of type HTTP servlet response. The instance of HTTP servlet response is created by the web container for each JSP request. It can be used to add or manipulate response such as redirect response to another resource, send error, etc. Let's see an example for this. We'll say response.send redirect to http://www.google.com, and let's run this and check the output. When we refresh the page, we'll go to Google. So that's what happens here. Next we learn about the config implicit object. In JSP, config is an implicit object of type servlet config. This object can be used to get initialization parameter for a particular JSP page. The config object is created by the web container for each JSP page. Let's have an example for this. We'll paste the example here. So here we are using the config object to get the servlet context and to set attributes a value of Alex Rider with the name, and we out.printing the config.getServlet context.get attribute with the name. Let's check this out. We'll go to localhost 8080 and we get our value Alex Rider printed. Wow, how fascinating is that? Next is the JSP application of implicit object. In JSP, application is an implicit object of type servlet context. The instance of servlet context is created only once by the web container when application or project is deployed on the server. This object can be used to initialize parameters from configuration file. It can also be used to get, set or remove attributes from the application scope. Now let's see an example for the application object. We'll copy this and we'll paste it here. What we are doing is we are using the application object to set an attribute called dname with the value Kulesh, and we are creating a string of application.get attribute, the dname key, and we are printing the driver name. Let's check what gets printed. We say Kulesh 143. Let's run this out. And we get driver name is Kulesh 143, just like that. Okay, next is the session implicit object. In JSP, session is an implicit object of type HTTP session. The Java developer can use this object to set, get or remove attributes or get session information. We'll have an example for this. We'll have a session object created. We'll say session dot set attribute, and we'll call this attribute user, and we'll give this a value of Iragan the dragon, and let's try to print this out. When we run this, we get hello Iragan the dragon, like that. Okay. Next is the page context implicit object. In JSP, page context is an implicit object of type page context class. The page context object can be used to set or get or remove attributes from one of the following scopes: page request, session or application. In JSP, page scope is the default scope. Now let's see an example. We'll have this here, page context or set attribute, and we'll give the name as object key as user, and we'll provide a name here. We'll say Christopher Paolini, and we'll provide the page context or scope as page scope. And the next thing, we'll make a string s equals to cast string with page context dot get attribute user. And the next thing, we'll out dot print our value s. Let's check this out. And we get Christopher Paolini printed like that. Next is the page implicit object. In JSP, page is an implicit object of the type Java object class. This object is assigned to the reference of auto-generated servlet class. It is written as object page equals this. I'll show you an example for the page tag. Page implicit object. Here in the top is an example. We have our lesser than sign, percentage mark and at, and the object keyword page with content type text HTML, charset UTF-8 and language as Java. So what this does is this converts our page into HTML file. Okay, let's go to the final implicit object, the JSP exception object. In JSP, exception is an implicit object of type java-lang.throwable class. This object can be used to print the exception, but it can only be used in error pages. It is better to learn it after page directive. Let's see an example for this. So I made the error page here, and I set the is error page as true, and I outdoor print an error message with the outdoor print and exception.get message. Okay, now inside the index.jsp we'll have an exception. We say 200 divided by 0. And let's run this out and check the exception. Because there's an exception, we get an exception error message like this. So that's how this works. We can have many errors and get the error message JSP loaded just like that. Alright, today we learned about all the JSP implicit objects. We learned about the out that prints our response writer values, and next we learned about request object. It gets the request and provides the response, and next we learned the response object which provides the response to us, and then we learned about the config implicit object which provides a config message, and then we learned about the application implicit object which is the full context of the JSP container. Then we learned about the session implicit object. We can use session to declare temporary session values and have them taken and printed inside our application when the session is there in the application. Then we made the page context implicit object. Here we got the page context and declare values and got examples printed from the page context. Then we learned about the page implicit object, which is an implicit object of the type object class, and this object can be assigned to reference auto-generated servlet classes. And finally we learned about the exception implicit object, which shows an exception message or provides an exception error message as we want. Okay, so today you learned about the JSP implicit tags from me, and I think you got a clear understanding of how to work with JSP implicit objects in Spring Boot. Okay, so today's lesson is over. I see you in another lesson another day. Until then, goodbye guys.